You know, it's hard to beat a hot hatch. Fun, practical and reasonably affordable. The default choice for most people is the Golf GTI, but today we're going to have a look around one of its fiercest rivals, the Focus ST. Now Ford have definitely not taken a leaf out of the Honda Civic Type R book in the styling department. In fact, you might even struggle to tell it apart from the more basic ST line. Up front you get this larger honeycomb grille with the ST badge just to remind you what you're dealing with. Now Ford do like to change up the engines when it comes to the ST. First generation 2 litre naturally aspirated, second generation 2.5 turbo 5-cylinder, third generation 2 litre turbo, and this generation is a 2.3 litre turbo, a reworked version of the previous generation's Focus RS. All good. Now the ST sits 10mm lower than your standard Focus. You also get some very cool matte grey 19-inch alloys, and they are covered in Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres. This is Ford Performance Blue and it's a €1,500 option. Around back it has a nice purposeful squatted stance. You get a chunky roof spoiler and some massive twin exhausts. Practicality is the same as your standard Focus, 375 litres of boot space, a nice space saver spare wheel and decent space in the back. Plus you can have a 5-door hatch, an estate version, diesel or petrol, a 6-speed manual or 7-speed auto. Prices for the ST start at around €45,000. Up front you get these really nice Recaro seats, half leather, hold you in tight on the back side and on the sides here. If you were maybe a bit larger it might be too tight, but other than that they hug you in all the right places. The padded steering wheel is nicely wrapped in some perforated leather, and it has a flat bottom, which is kind of ironic because flat bottom is seen as sporty in cars, but sporty people definitely don't have flat bottoms. They have nice round bottoms. The gear stick is nice and chunky, but I'm not a massive fan of how it looks. The kind of brushed aluminium is not the greatest looking thing in the world. You also have a head-up display option on this, which is €500. I really wouldn't bother with that. You do get some infotainment and the standard screen sort of sitting out of the dash here. I would prefer if it was integrated, but there we are. The graphics on it are really not good enough and not up to scratch in comparison to some other brands, especially when you're spending like 45 grand. Now you can just integrate it with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay and it looks much better and works much better, so if you were buying it I would just use that. Otherwise it's all laid out intuitively, all practicality is good. The only thing I will say is for that price point some of the materials aren't the greatest. Everything you touch is fine, but just some of the kind of hidden stuff is a bit scratchy and cheaper looking. Now you get 4 different driving modes, slippery, normal, sport and track. They're all fairly self-explanatory and give different levels of throttle response, steering input and suspension setup. If you want to get the track mode, you do have to pay a bit more for the performance pack, which also gives you launch control. I think we're going to have to test that out now. Right, so to set up launch control, you just pick it here in front of you, you get some race flags, you pop it into first, mash the throttle, it holds and go. You're never going to use that much. You'll do it a few times and you'll just get bored of it. But you know, it's a nice little party piece. All that is really lovely, but this engine really shines over 2000 RPM. So between 3 and 4 is where you get peak torque. And it will pull all the way to redline to 6500. But you'll find the best between 2 and 4 and you'll just keep it there just to really get on that turbo. The ST also comes with anti-lag to prevent turbo lag. So it keeps the throttle open when you lift off ever so slightly, just to, once you go back on the throttle, it is ready to go again. Now it's not working there because we've lifted off for too long, but if you're doing more sporty driving and lifting off for a shorter amount of time, you really do notice the anti-lag and it helps just keep it moving and swiftly cutting through corners. Changing gears is short and snappy and you do cycle through them quite easily. According to Ford, it is 7% shorter than your standard Focus. Personally, I would have gone maybe a bit shorter, like 11%, just for that bit more eagerness from what is a brilliant engine. Now, Ford have kindly given us some extra technology to make us feel like driving gods, and that is rev matching. So when you downshift, it automatically matches to the appropriate revs of the engine. Ready to go then. Yep, and it goes when it wants to, alright. So now I feel like Sebastian Loeb, all thanks to technology. Now the suspension setup on the ST is called continuously controlled damping. So basically it gives you damping depending on which mode you're in. So obviously normal, you get softer, and track and sport, harder suspension. Fairly straightforward. I think they've struck the perfect balance with the suspension, to be fair. In normal mode it is nice and comfortable and you can cruise quite comfortably on the motorway or on this type of road. In town it deals with bumps really well, and then when you want to drive a bit more enthusiastically, stick it in sport or track mode. You know you're in a hot hatch, it is stiff, but it pays off in how well it handles. It's crazy good. Now talking about handling, the steering on the ST is very quick. It is just 2 turns lock to lock, so a very small input here is definitely quite a larger input than you'd feel at the wheels. If you can notice that there. Can you notice that, Tim? We're all shaky. The grip at times is kind of mind-bending. It's got torque vectoring, so you can get 100% of the power down to the wheel with more traction, and it just hangs on through the corners so well. It's a bit nuts. Now, handling is phenomenal, to be fair. You do get some extra technology to make you feel better about your handling, such as an eLSD and torque vectoring. So you can redistribute most of the power to one wheel to really pull you around that corner, and with the torque vectoring you can apply brake to the inside wheel to also get you around the corner. Anyway, ultimately it makes this thing handle crazy good. Now it does take a lot to upset the suspension, but one thing I have noticed is if you are mid-corner and there's a sort of a divot that will kick you either left or right, you really feel it through the steering, and you have to be aware of that because it will sort of wrestle with you. Now, not to sound like one of those cheesy Instagram accounts, but comparison is the thief of joy, and that is definitely the case here. If you compare this to its little brother, the Fiesta ST or the Golf GTI, it probably loses out. But on its merits, on its day, this thing is fantastic, and it is definitely well worth a look. If you would like to search for a Focus on Cars Ireland, please do click on the link above. Please do like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll be back next week with another review. So see you next time.